Under the cold glow of the Bosphorus, a city older than empires waits, its heart beating beneath layers of marble, betrayal, and forgotten oaths. Tonight, Istanbul breathes again, the air trembles with the whispers of nations, the echo of negotiations that never truly end. And somewhere, behind closed doors heavy with history, the talks between Pakistan and Afghanistan begin to fracture. Once more, it starts not with shouting, but with silence. A silence that carries weight, the kind that settles in after promises rot. The world calls it diplomacy, but here, under the arches of an empire that fell by its own intrigue, the line between peace and deception blurs like smoke. They gathered in Istanbul not to make history, but to hide it. Officials in press suits, translators whose eyes flicker with unease, and envoys who know that every word spoken tonight could be a blade in disguise. The agenda: to restore trust between two nations divided by ghosts, by borders drawn in the wrong century. But trust, once shattered, becomes a weapon sharper than any sword. The Americans watched from afar, their breath held, their influence waning like the last light over the Golden Horn. China, meanwhile, waited patiently, its ambitions wrapped in silk and silence. India lingered in the shadows, calculating, listening for weakness in every whispered exchange. And then there was Turkey, once the center of empires, now a host to the world's unraveling. Qatar drifted quietly between them, the financier of faith and fortune, its influence subtle yet potent. The setting was perfect, a city where history itself seems to conspire against peace. Istanbul has always been a crossroads for the desperate and the divine. But every crossroad demands a price. When the talks began, there was a fleeting illusion of progress. Cameras flashed, hands shook, statements were made. Yet beneath those gestures lay something rotten. Each delegation brought not just diplomats, but ghosts of soldiers lost in forgotten valleys, of promises made to powers that never intended to keep them. The Taliban's resurgence had already tilted the balance. Kabul, once again, was a chessboard where pieces moved at the will of unseen players. Pakistan sought stability, or so they claimed, but their fears ran deeper, the fear of fire crossing their borders, of ideologies spilling like oil across sand. Afghanistan, bleeding from within, came seeking recognition, dignity, perhaps even forgiveness. But forgiveness in this part of the world is rarer than peace itself. By the second day, the veneer began to crack. Reports emerged of quiet arguments, of interpreters dismissed and hazed, of envoys leaving rooms with eyes full of restrained fury. It was as if the spirit of the city itself, ancient Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, had infected them with its own cursed legacy. For 1,000 years, empires came here to negotiate their survival. None succeeded. The Ottomans tried to balance East and West, faith and empire, but even they fell to the same disease, ambition disguised as diplomacy. The same disease now seeps into every corridor of this modern summit. But then, something curious happened. Late one night, when the official meetings had ended, a small circle of representatives met privately, away from cameras, away from translators. Witnesses would later speak, quietly, of a conversation that was never meant to happen. It was here, in the flickering candlelight of a centuries-old chamber beneath Topkapı Palace, that the true game began. China's envoy spoke first, with the calm precision of someone who already knows the ending. If peace cannot be built, he said softly, then perhaps it must be bought. India's representative responded with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Peace, he replied, isn't bought, it's inherited. Or stolen. Turkey listened, but did not speak. For Turkey understood something none of them did, that Istanbul had heard every lie before, and it remembers them all. The Bosphorus keeps its secrets. Its waters once carried crusaders and conquerors, and now it carries whispers of alliances that should not exist. Pakistan's envoy leaned forward then, the candlelight trembling on his face. What if, he said, we are not the ones negotiating? What if someone else already decided? The room fell silent. For a moment, even the city seemed to hold its breath. If you've come this far, listener, you already feel it, the pull of something forbidden. The sense that behind every headline lies another story, darker and older than we're told. And that's what this channel exists for, to trace the shadows others fear to follow. If you wish to keep walking these corridors of lost history, to uncover the truths buried beneath official statements and smiling photographs, then do not just watch, join us. Subscribe, not for content, but for revelation. Every week, another veil will be lifted. Another secret will speak. The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, once you see what's beneath, you cannot unsee it. As dawn approached on the third day, the Istanbul talks stood on the edge of collapse. Qatar's mediators grew restless, offering proposals that seemed more desperate than diplomatic. Turkey's leadership, caught between rival interests, tried to hold the illusion together, yet it was already too late. Somewhere in the fog of translation and intent, the fragile bridge between Pakistan and Afghanistan began to crumble. Leaked notes hinted at accusations of betrayal, of secret pacts with powers unnamed. China's patience were thin. India's satisfaction was hidden but palpable. Outside, as the call to prayer rose over the city, a foreign journalist was found wandering the alleys near the conference center, murmuring that the meeting had been decided before it began. No one knew what he meant. By evening, he was gone. Some believed the failure of the Istanbul talks was inevitable, that no table could hold the weight of so much history. Others whispered that the talks were never meant to succeed at all, that they were theater, a performance stage to distract from something else moving in the dark. Perhaps in Beijing, perhaps in New Delhi, perhaps in places we do not yet see. The ghosts of empire still move among us, their hands invisible, but their influence everywhere. In the weeks that followed, statements were issued, each contradicting the other. Pakistan blamed mistranslation. Afghanistan blamed betrayal. Turkey blamed exhaustion. Yet none of them could explain why certain documents vanished from the record, or why a set of encrypted communications between unnamed envoys was later traced not to either capital, but to servers in Doha. Someone, it seems, had been listening. Someone who knew that peace is not born in conference rooms, but buried beneath them. Historians may one day write this off as another failed summit. But those who were there tell a different story. They speak of the night the lights flickered in the grand hall, of the strange static that filled their headsets, of the moment every microphone cut out at once. Some said it was a technical glitch. Others swore they heard a voice, a single word, whispered in Turkish, before the systems died. The word was Bitti. It means it's over, and perhaps it was. For after that night, something shifted. Within days, reports emerged of new border clashes, of intelligence leaks, of sudden movements along trade routes once considered dormant. China announced new security partnerships across Central Asia. India increased its influence in Kabul through humanitarian channels. Qatar quietly expanded its mediation networks. And Turkey simply smiled. In the heart of Istanbul, the ancient city still watches. The stones remember every betrayal, every oath, every moment when men thought they could shape destiny with signatures and handshakes. But destiny, like the Bosphorus, obeys no one. It flows according to older laws written long before our nations were born. And perhaps that is the true reason the talks failed. Not because of politics, not because of pride, but because the city itself refused to let them succeed. Some say, late at night, if you walk near the old city walls, you can still hear them, the voices of that final meeting, echoing through the marble corridors. Fragments of words lost to translation, promises that turn to ash. They say the city hums when diplomacy dies. And on that night, Istanbul hummed louder than it had in centuries. So now we're left with questions, not answers. Did Pakistan truly seek peace, or a pause in a greater game? Was Afghanistan's delegation ever free to negotiate, or were they bound by invisible chains from the start? What did China and India really discuss when the cameras turned away? And who, in the end, profited from the collapse? The official reports will never say. But history always keeps the receipts. The world will move on, as it always does, distracted by the next crisis, the next summit, the next illusion of control. But somewhere in a locked archive, the minutes of the Istanbul talks lie sealed, marked confidential, unread, and touchable. And in those pages, perhaps, lies the truth that none of them dare speak. Tell me, watcher of shadows, if those pages were ever opened, if the real story of Istanbul were finally revealed, would you want to know what it said? Or would you, like so many before, choose the comfort of silence? Tell me in the comments if you could unearth the truth, no matter how dark would you.